This is the OTB Television Network, a service of Capital District Off-Track Betting.
It's Golden Sense in full flight for the wire over Flashback, and Golden Sense have won the Santa Ana Derby.
Orb has won the Kentucky Derby. First of the game. Will take charges surging, and it's a photo finish. It's too close to call.
And Animal Kingdom wins the Dubai World Cup.
Macho Man!
Broadcasting live from the Capital OTB studios, this is Racing Across America with Seth Merrow.
Good morning and welcome to the Wednesday edition of Racing Across America. I'm Seth Merrill. Thanks for joining us. Coming up a little later on, Wednesday means a regular visit from Jeremy Plonk, HorsePlayerNow.com, Night School, Countdown to the Crown. We'll talk just what we've been counting down all year long with Jeremy on Wednesdays, the Kentucky Derby this past Saturday. We'll get some of his thoughts and then some of the other stakes action as well over the weekend. But certainly Kentucky Derby will be a main focus of attention as well. A little later on with Gene Kirschner, who covers horse racing for the Buffalo News. He was down in Louisville over the weekend as well, so we'll get some of his thoughts on the weekend action also. Do want to give you a little heads up on promotions and events, Capital OTB on the website at the various branches coming up through the remainder of May. This Friday, May 9th, the grand opening of the Lakeview Inn new Easy Bet location. That's this Friday the 9th. Coming up on the 10th, do want to remind you, if you play the Capital OTB Handicapping Series monthly, the May event is coming up this Saturday the 10th, the Triple Threat, right down here at the Clubhouse Racebook, 711 Central Avenue in Albany. There'll be a couple of knockout challenges on Fridays this month on CapitalOTB.com. That's Friday the 16th and Friday the 30th, $100 knockout challenges. Preakness Day, of course, will be another big day down here at the parlor, down here at the Clubhouse Racebook. $1,000 bankroll, and that is, of course, Saturday the 17th. Be a couple of show-vivers on the last couple of Saturdays this month on CapitalOTB.com. And finally, the last Saturday of the month, grand reopening of the Queensbury branch is Friday the 23rd. And then finally on the last Saturday of the month, the last day of the month, May 31st, the grand opening of the old Log Inn, another new Easy Bet location. So again, you can keep up with all those promotions and events happening at Capital OTB, online at the parlors here at the Teletheater. Check out CapitalOTB.com. Some of the news over the past few days. Yesterday in Louisiana, there was a meeting by Louisiana lawmakers. They were considering legislation that would force Churchill Downs to spend 10% of their slots revenues on improvements to the fairgrounds. And obviously that fairground stories has been bubbling up and in the news now for at least the past couple of months, and really longer if you go into the end of their meet. But since the meet ended, the lawmakers have gotten upset, the horsemen, the fans with Churchill Downs. And again, there was a meeting of the lawmakers yesterday to consider this legislation, which has already passed one half of the legislature down there, passed the House of Representatives 94-0. The Senate committee yesterday deferred action on the bill for 1 week, but as the follow-up article in the Blood Horse says, they deferred it for a week, but not before blasting Churchill Downs and criticizing the company for not sending executives to Baton Rouge for the hearing. One of the senators said, I want to deliver a message to corporate. I need a promise or a commitment. I need something to happen. We're hearing this racetrack is just a shell of itself. Churchill Downs has committed to make improvements. The legislature is now looking closely, and I'm sure Churchill Downs does not want the legislature looking over their shoulder. So we'll see what happens. It's now, again, this legislation is pushed for a week that would require them to use 10% of their slot revenues on improvements, but they've committed to make some improvements to the track and customer service, et cetera, et cetera. We'll see what happens, but things still making the news down there in Louisiana. Talked about it over the past couple of weeks when we had Gary Johnson on with us on Tuesdays. Beulah Park has closed for good. They did so over the weekend, and they had a crowd estimated at 5,000 on hand to say goodbye. I have an article linked on Equidaily this morning, and they have some photos of the last day of the track as well. And you see this situation. They got quotes in the article from people who remember the better days of the track, and they came out for the last day, and you just you shake your head and wonder, where were these people, every other day? But they showed up on the last day. Beulah Park, built in 1896, occasionally played host to harness racing matinees. Was the host site of the Franklin County Fairs early on, but then in 1923 it was decided that thoroughbred racing should be held at the track. So on April 21st, 1923, a 2-year-old named Homer won the first race for a $5,000 purse. And then the article goes on to say the average purse at Beulah this year was about $2,700. So over those 90 plus years, really purse is not keeping up. As the article does note, the $2,700 average purse is a pittance in an industry known as the sport of kings, but which now struggles with attendance nationwide because so much pari-mutuel betting is done online and at off-track facilities. So last day of racing at Beulah, they did have a $50,000 stakes race that I believe, according to this, was the last race of the day. I meant to pull up the chart, but the winner of that last race in a photo finish, jockey Edgar Pacar. And if you watched us talking to Gary Johnson here on the show on Tuesdays over the past few months, you do note that Edgar Pacar certainly the leading rider down there, so it was fitting. And Pacar was quoted as saying, as they closed the place down and he walked out a winner, "I can't explain the feeling, but it's kind of sad. I'm happy I won the last race, but I realize we're done racing here." So Beulah Park, now another one of those tracks that remember when. It's in the sunset. Their license has been shifted to another track, but it's 2 or 3 hours away, and they did it. Again, a gaming company now owns the track, and I believe they have a casino somewhere near Beulah. They didn't want to compete with themselves with a new racino, so they took the license and moved elsewhere. So Beulah Park closed for good on the weekend. Opportunity, we talked a little bit about him yesterday, having some ankle surgery. At that time, Bob Baffert was not saying or didn't know how long Opportunity will be away. He was on the radio with my partner, my son, the lead partner, Steve Bick. He was on his radio show on Sunday, and Opportunity going to get 30 days off and then resume light training if all goes well. But a month off is the game plan now for some minor surgery that Opportunity went through. Baffert does note we're going to miss all the major stuff as far as the 3-year-olds in the summertime, but he's going to be a pretty good horse in the fall. So if you're an Opportunity fan, month on the sidelines, look for him back again probably, end of summer or early fall. Interesting article on the Clancy's website written by Tom Law and covers the West Point folks, our friends at West Point, who did so well with Commanding Curve in the Derby. And the article's kind of fun. It just notes how excited they were finishing second in the Kentucky Derby. And Tom Law writes about in the middle of the early part of the article. That's right, the Kentucky Derby seems like it's about the only race on the planet, or at least here in the United States, where finishing second can feel like a derby, can feel like a victory. But the fact of the matter is, you won second in the Derby. That's a pretty good accomplishment. Now, he does note historically that hasn't always been the case with 49er not being able to catch winning colors. Woody Stevens wasn't too happy. Empire Maker getting beat by Funny Side. Bobby Frankel wasn't happy. Grindstone and Cavalier. Bob Baffert wasn't happy. So there are situations where you come in maybe thinking you have the best horse, or you lose a nail biter and it's a little bit of a disappointment. But when you come in and you're a syndicate and a bunch of people are all part of the horse, and you're going off as the 3rd or 4th longest price on the board, you make a nice run down the stretch and wind up second in the Kentucky Derby, it's a pretty good feeling. And there's a quote from the president of West Point Thoroughbreds, Terry Finley, quotes in the article, says, "It's an unbelievable feeling to be 100 yards from the wire and think you've got a shot to win the Kentucky Derby." And I imagine it is. And again, hats off to them. It'll be fun to watch. They have now said Commanding Curve likely to skip the Preakness and head to the Belmont Stakes. So we'll see what happens next with Commanding Curve. Ring Weekend, another West Point horse, as I've read, is possible for the Preakness. We'll see how that shapes up over the next week and a half or so. But again, congratulations to the folks at West Point for the big performance by Commanding Curve this past Saturday. Post-Derby urine and blood tests have all come back clean. Again, this was for both the Derby and the Oaks. It was interesting, the article that covered this said they examined for more than 1,500 substances. So that's a pretty comprehensive drug test they do. There's complaints about the drugs in horse racing and whatnot, but I think if you look at really the number of positives there are given the number of races and race horses and the fact that they're checking for 1,500 plus substances, it's actually, I think you can make a case it's a pretty clean sport. Previously, the Kentucky Racing Commission had given out the results of 75 pre-race and out-of-competition tests for horses nominated for stakes races on Friday and Saturday. They were all clean as well. So clean and A+ as far as the medication tests for the Kentucky Derby and the Oaks over the past weekend. Our buddy Gary West, who we have on the show occasionally, had a nice Derby follow-up column on ESPN.com within the past couple of days. And Gary's a great writer. He's a wordsmith. And if you haven't read it, I have that linked on Equidaily as well, and I'd recommend it down in the middle of the article. No other sport is so democratic. No other game is so accessible as horse racing. You might have heard it's the sport of kings. Forget it. That's flapdoodle, a word that Gary uses quite often. Horse racing is the sport of plebeian dreamers who approach it in cowboy hats and hard hats and Panama fedoras, who always lie their hopes and wishes at its altar. Goes on to comment about just a feel-good story. And, far from being the sport of kings and all the pomp that goes with kings, this group wins the Kentucky Derby, and winning jockey Victor Espinoza, for example, was telling after the race how humble and fortunate he felt, and he became tearful when he spoke about kids diagnosed with cancer at the City of Hope Hospital in Los Angeles, which he dedicates some of his earnings to. So really nice connections involved with this. And then Gary says even though California Chrome was the 5-2 favorite, the Derby victory for all of that was a beautiful one. And he goes on to say, we, like the connections of California Chrome, can be grateful for a singular and beautiful moment Saturday afternoon that reminded the world that this is the greatest and most democratic of sports. So again, I like Gary's writing. This is his Derby follow-up column on ESPN, and he did a nice job. You can catch that again at Equidaily this morning if you want to take a look and give it the follow-up. Also, something linked on Equidaily, a little less enthusiastic about this one, but coming out of the Dallas Morning News, there is an article titled "A Last Hurrah for Texas Horse Racing." Talks about how at one time, when really early on when Texas got horse racing, they did get the Breeders' Cup at Lone Star back in 2004. 53,000 people showed up. It's a little bit different now. The article goes on to say last year Texas ranked 17th among the states for purses paid in thoroughbred races. The article also mentions Suffolk Downs and how there are haves and have-nots now. Texas, Suffolk Downs, and Massachusetts are among the have-nots as far as the slots tracks. A Lone Star representative mentions that Texas is surrounded by states that offer better horse racing prize money, and that obviously hurts. And they're boosted by slot machines. And this, again, Lone Star representative goes on to say Remington Park had the padlock ready to put on the door in 2004 when Oklahoma voters approved expanded gaming. And they're kind of still waiting for it. In Massachusetts, with Suffolk Downs, expanded gaming has been improved. Now they're just trying to decide, do they get it at Suffolk? So that's the question mark up there. At Texas, they're still chasing the legislation, but obviously, when you look at the numbers they put out in this article, you see how things have really, really just kind of drastically changed. It mentions early in the article, attendance and total wagering are less than half their levels from the year 2000. That clearly is not a good sign. And over at Sam Houston, they've juggled things up in light of these realities, and they reduced their racing days, which allowed them to raise purses on each day that they do race. They're paying out about $160 a day now, which again, they've been able to do because they've condensed dates, but that's still compared to $250 a day in Louisiana. So they're chasing, and then the article mentions the gaming companies that are partnered with the tracks down in Texas, and in doing so are kind of waiting and hoping that gaming comes in. They're ready to move forward if that does happen. But again, this comes out of the Dallas Morning News, a last hurrah for Texas horse racing. You can pick that up on Equidaily as well. And just another look at some of these racing jurisdictions around the country that are now the have-nots that, we got to keep our fingers crossed for. The next one up is that Suffolk Downs, which does have decision being made sometime in the foreseeable future whether they will get slots machines or not, because in the spots where they don't have them, things look kind of grim in some of these places. All right, we'll take our first break. When we come back, as promised earlier, we'll be joined by Jeremy Plonk, horseplayernow.com, Countdown to the Crown, Night School, all of that. And we'll talk some Kentucky Derby with Jeremy right after this. Stay tuned.
Missed one of our TV shows? No worries. Now you can catch all your favorite programs online. Simply log on to CapitalOTB.com and click on the YouTube link at the bottom of the homepage. And look for our new podcast coming soon. CapitalOTB.com. Log on today.
The Capital OTB Handicapping Challenge Series is back. That's right. The 2014 Capital OTB Handicapping Challenge Series is back, and it's your chance to win thousands in cash and prizes, and a seat at the 2015 Handicapping Championship in Las Vegas. This month's contest is the Triple Threat on May 10th. So sign up today, online at CapitalOTB.com, or stop in at the Clubhouse Racebook.
The future of online betting is here, and only at the all-new CapitalOTBBet.com. With a newly designed and engineered internet wagering platform, enhanced video streaming, additional funding options, and 3 new individual wagering opportunities, CapitalOTBBet.com delivers a state-of-the-art wagering experience found nowhere else in horse racing. Combine that with our all-new mobile website. You have 2 of the most powerful, innovative, and advanced wagering platforms available today. CapitalOTBBet.com. Log on today.
Hey, race fans, head down to the all-new Clubhouse Racebook and get in the game. With live horse racing on more than 250 flat-screen TVs, state-of-the-art wagering terminals, fantastic food and drinks, an amazing Vegas-style atmosphere with seating for nearly 900 of your closest friends. Conveniently located at 711 Central Avenue, right off Exit 5 of I-90 in Albany, the Clubhouse Racebook is the better choice.
I'm Anthony Mormino. Join me weekdays at 9 for the Handicappers Report. We'll handicap the top tracks across the country and help you prepare for the day in racing. That's the Handicappers Report, weekdays at 9, only on the OTB TV network.
This is Racing Across America with Seth Merrow.
Very happy to be joined now by Jeremy Plonk, Night School, horseplayernow.com, Countdown to the Crown. Good morning, Jeremy.
Good morning, Seth. Always good to be with you.
Happy to have you on board. And speaking of Countdown to the Crown, we've been talking about it with you for the last few months. The Countdown to the Crown package typically gets updated on Friday, and people can find it online. Very comprehensive look at the 3-year-old scene. But now that the Derby's out of the way, will you still continue through the Triple Crown?
Oh, yeah. We go through the Belmont Stakes, and this year we're going through the Queen's Plate on July 6th as an agreement with Woodbine. So it'll be available every Friday through July the 6th. And the countdown this week will take the horses 19 through 1 in the Derby, give detailed notes on their trips, what we recommend for them moving forward, and how to look at them as potential horses in the upcoming Triple Crown leg. So we'll have a postscript this week, and then in between the Derby and or in between the Preakness and the Belmont, we'll also have some featurey kind of lessons or articles each Friday.
Excellent. And as always on Wednesday, we also like to go back and remind people about the night school session from the night before if they'd like to pick up the archive. And this was an interesting topic last night, cultivating newbies and talking a little bit about how to exploit the popularity in the mainstream of the Kentucky Derby. Give us a little update on what went on last night.
Well, we have Mike Gaffigan, the vice president of the Maryland Jockey Club. Of course, they host the Preakness coming up in a couple weeks, and their goal is to create and develop off of that bounce. And we at Horse Player now work closely with them in the Wagering 101 tent in the infield. So we explain to folks what we do there and what tracks can be doing in terms of player development, and more so than just fan education, but player development and taking these new fans and turning them into customers. That's what it's all about. We also had Terry Finney from West Point Thoroughbreds. Of course, they just finished second in the Derby with Commanding Curve. And Terry's been a big advocate over the years of getting new people into the game and new blood into ownership. And a lot of his owners came through the ranks of horse players. And so he knows that is the fertile ground of developing people into the industry, that your first interest usually comes as a participant in the gambling aspect of it. And so that's where we kind of focus our attention. How do we turn these folks who are casual interested in seeing the Derby telecast, over 15 million strong, how do we start making players out of them?
And did you give Terry a little chance to crow last night?
He was very humble. I mean, it's one of those things. They've been second in a lot of big races, with they were second to Rachel Alexandra in the big one up at Saratoga. So, yeah, he said, a big one maybe not be too far away from them, but if they finish second in the Derby, and that's the best they ever do, it was sure a great week.
Yeah, especially when you're, the fourth longest price on the board and you come down and make a nice run like that. I can see where they have a lot of reason to be proud, no question about it. All right, Jeremy, let's hop right in and take a look at some of the racing action from the weekend. And obviously, I mentioned at the top of the show, this is what we've been leading to, the Kentucky Derby. We're going to pick it up coming right out of the gate and watch him come down the stretch. One of the horses that I liked a little bit, Danza, took the worst of it and got bumped around a little bit. I had Intense Holiday on top. That one at the top of the stretch, when they came around, the second time, I thought he was in pretty good position, and I thought between the top of the stretch and the eighth pole, he kind of was sitting looking like at any moment maybe he could make the move, but then about the eighth pole, I think the distance caught up with Intense Holiday. California Chrome, on the other hand, just defined himself as the top of the class despite the time in the buyer figure. Commanding Curve, again, we'll tip our hats to West Point for that nice performance. Wicked Strong and Samrod, I thought both ran well. Maybe some other disappointments. Wildcat Red just seemed to never get up into what we were anticipating was going to be a blazing early pace. You can talk about that a little bit too, how the pace didn't live up to what we thought. But again, as we talk here, we'll pick them up coming out of the gate and take them around the track.
Well, the pace wasn't as fast as some projected. I think one of the big problems with this Derby pace was there wasn't a sprinter in the field. Wildcat Red is more of a miler, and he's got miler speed, but there wasn't a pure sprinter in the field. And Pablo Del Monte could have been that horse if they opted to stay in, especially from the far outside post, where they would have used a lot of that speed to go get the lead. This pace projected to be about a 47 to me on paper, so they went even a little bit slower than that. But I did not see this as a 45 or a 46 like we've seen the last 2 years. I thought it was more of a Shackelford kind of pace that we saw from 3 years ago, which was in the 47s. And Shackelford lived a long time on the front end and ended up fourth in that Derby. So this was a manageable pace on paper. If California Chrome got away from the gate and was able to sit the kind of trip that he did, he figured to be awfully tough. And he got that perfect trip. He earned that perfect trip. I mean, you've got to put yourself in that position. In a field of 20, a lot of horses, 19 horses actually started. In a field of 19, a lot of horses weren't able to put themselves in that great trip. So credit to him, credit to Victor Espinoza. It's set up nicely for him because he was good enough to get where he needed to be.
And as we watched him come down the stretch, I'll just ask you, as we watched him come down the stretch the first time, it made me think, and I'll talk about a couple of trips here. How about Calvin Burrell coming out of the gate and bam, right to the rail?
Well, that's what he's done in a couple different races with the big horses. This is some success. It was an identical trip with Mind That Bird, and from the 19, I'm not sure what they expected him to do much more than that. And I thought it was a good ride. I mean, I don't understand the wild criticism. I mean, for Burrell to be, he was too far back on a slow pace, you're not going to judge what the pace is in the Derby, especially from that far back. He's so far back, he can't see how fast the front runners are going and really how far the distance is between him and the front. I mean, so there would be no way of him to know that they're going 47 and 2 from the back of the pack like that. You would just have to assume that the Derby pace is going to be pretty solid, and you go with what's brought to you. Calvin Burrell closing up the rail from the back of the pack has been his MO. I don't know what they expected when they named Calvin Burrell to ride the horse, but I'll tell you this. Calvin Burrell's won 3 Kentucky Derbies. Billy Gowan has 3 horses in his stable. 3 horses in his stable. Calvin's got as many Derby trophies as this guy has horses in his stable. To come out publicly and deride Calvin Burrell for the way he handled your horse in the Derby, I just find classless and just completely off base. You may not like the ride. Keep it to yourself. I mean, and the horse was the 7th wager or the 8th wagering choice, and he ran 7th, I believe. I mean, so he ran right where he was supposed to be. I mean, he was beaten almost the identical margin by Danza in the Arkansas Derby that he was in the Kentucky Derby. He ran his race. The horse just isn't that good. I don't understand the outcry on how Calvin Burrell somehow wronged Rideau and Curlin.
And I'm with you on the fact that, boy, if you have Calvin, you kind of know what you're going to get. That's his whole MO. And so that they were surprised that he did it was the thing that made me scratch my head a little bit.
It's like putting Pat Valenzuela up and being surprised you went to the front.
Exactly. And let's also, as we move away from the Derby, let me just get some thoughts. 2 weeks away from the Preakness, what are you thinking? I mean, it looks like Ride on Curlin is going to take a shot. Obviously, California Chrome will, maybe Danza, and then we have some new shooters. What are you looking for in the Preakness, a week and a half out?
Well, I'd be surprised if Danza comes back. Todd Fletcher rarely runs a horse in the Preakness. If they do, it's almost always because owners want to run in the Preakness. And so Fletcher's MO is not to come back in the Middle Jewel for whatever the reason is, but he just does not support the Preakness. So, I would be surprised if Danza shows up there. I think you're going to see the 2 horses out of the Derby, California Chrome and also Ride on Curlin. It'll be similar to what we saw with Big Brown in 2008 when Gallego was the only horse who wanted to challenge him. There were only 2 horses coming out of that 2008 Derby after Big Brown's dominant win as the favorite. So they thought this horse was the biggest favorite and was the biggest favorite since Big Brown. It would kind of lend to about a 9-horse field, a 10-horse field with 2 Derby leftovers and some new shooters trying to take a shot for the second money. I think that's the kind of field we're going to see set up for the Preakness. But a completely different dynamic at Pimlico. I mean, look, the 2 horses I wrote about a month ago saying who can really throw a wrench into the Kentucky Derby pace were Pablo Del Monte, Social Inclusion, and Bayern, actually, 3 horses. All 3 of them look like they're going to be in the Preakness now. So the 3 most intense pace players in the 3-year-old scene this year were not in the Kentucky Derby. That's why it was a slow pace. But they're all in the Preakness as of today. So the Preakness pace will be completely different than what we saw in the Kentucky Derby, and it'll be a smaller field, and this field is going to be very interesting the way it plays out dynamically with the pace.
What do you make of Social Inclusion having missed that race down at Gulfstream last weekend?
It can't be a good thing. It's never a good thing when a horse is recovering from any kind of little bump or bruise this time of year. He's going to run the hardest race of his life coming up. I mean, the Wood Memorial is 1 1/8 miles against a field that was a couple nice horses, but not nearly as deep as you would get in the Preakness. You're not facing a horse like California Chrome or even a Bayern. I don't think any of the horses in the Wood Memorial were, on that level. Maybe Samrat, 1 horse. He had 1 horse in the Wood Memorial probably who would fit in the Preakness, really strongly. So this is definitely going to be his toughest test. He's missed the race now, and he's going to have other pace pressures. So Social Inclusion is, one of those horses who's going to really have his work cut out for him from losing some time and really facing a tough pace dynamic.
All right, let's shift our attention now and go to the day before the Derby because a lot of people think the best 3-year-old might have raced on Friday. We'll pick up coming out of the gate the Kentucky Oaks on Friday, and we'll watch number 13, Untappable, get it done under Rosie Napravnik. Number 11, My Miss Sophia, a nice second for Javier Castellano and Todd Fletcher. Untappable, again, coming off the 2 very nice races down at the fairgrounds and validated those 2 efforts. I will just also point out to people, if they want to keep on their radar screen during the race, the number 2, Rhea Antonia. That's her number, so you can see what you think of her going forward to the Preakness potentially. But Jeremy, give me your thoughts of Untappable and the Oaks.
Well, she was awesome. I mean, she really ran well. 2nd fastest Oaks in history, and she's kind of becoming my ghost sapper. I bet her at the good price in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile and Unloaded, thought she was a rising star and a real future player, and she didn't pay for me that day, and she's never lost since. And Ghost Sapper, I did the same thing on him in the King's Bishop at Saratoga years ago when he was on the rise. I thought he couldn't lose the King's Bishop. He was a nice 6 or 7 to 1 number that day. He came up a little short, and he never lost another race after that, and it was a much shorter price afterwards. I mean, the word is out, obviously, on Untappable now compared to earlier in her 2-year-old year. Folks know that she's developed into a star now, and she was really, really good in the Oaks. I mean, this was a good Oaks field. You know, there was some quality there. My Miss Sophia, I think, is a very nice filly. Lemons Forever, you know, regally bred. Her mama had won the Oaks, and she looked like going to Fairgrounds this year that she might be the one coming out of New Orleans. And it turned out that she's just not nearly in the same league as Untappable this spring. So Untappable beat a good cast in the Oaks, and she did it for fun. And she would be a serious threat in the Preakness if they would decide to move forward. You know, they're not going to go that route as they've announced, but she would be obviously the major threat to California Chrome. And she's got a good, good tracking running style. She doesn't need to be on the front. She can sit third or fourth and then blow horses away. You know, that's the style of horses who really run out big streaks. You know, they're not the deadpan closers often, and they're not the serious front-running gas burners. Those horses that can lay first over and just kind of blow by horses and pull away at will, like Cigar. You know, he almost ran the same race every single time. Those are the horses who were very successful, and it was a similar trip to what Untappable got in the Oaks and to what California Chrome got in the Derby. That's always what's made Zenyatta such an intriguing superstar to me, and probably underrated historically. I know her legions of people who love her and have an emotional attachment to her have rated her very high, but I don't think serious people have rated Zenyatta high enough because she came from so far back. To win that many races in a row with that kind of running style is truly remarkable. You see the ones who do run off winning streaks do it like Untappable more often than not.
And we again were watching the race as you were talking, and one of the things notable again was number 2, Ria Antonio, kind of fading in the stretch. What are your thoughts on possibly that one going forward to the Preakness?
That's just an overzealous owner. I mean, you know, the horse has changed hands 2 or 3 times now this year, from Englehart to Baffert, now to Tom Amoss. Tom Amoss is kind of putting the brakes on, saying, whoa, this morning on some of the quotes I've seen, you know, Philly's got to work yet on Monday, and we'll make a decision after that. So I don't think Tom's in a hurry to send her to the Preakness, but at the same time, you know, he's got a Breeders' Cup winner in his barn now. So, you know, you've got to do and say the right things. But, you know, she's not going to beat those horses. I mean, she's just not that good. She fades in the end of her races every race. Even in the Breeders' Cup, her one signature win, she wasn't finishing up strongly. She got bumped and put up, but it wasn't like she put away She's a Tiger and went on to victory. So, you know, this is a filly who's not going to finish at a mile and 3/16. Strong enough at the end to beat the boys, much less a good group of fillies. I mean, she's completely overmatched. It's nice to have a filly in the race. You know, I think it adds a little intrigue, that sort of deal like that, but not necessarily this filly.
And I alluded to it earlier. Some people think Untappable the best 3-year-old of either sex. If you were putting together a list of top 3-year-olds right now, where would you rank her?
No, I'd put her behind California Chrome. I mean, I think California Chrome's clearly the best. I mean, he's won 5 races in a row now where he's had a 5-length lead or more in every one of the races. I went back. This is the first 5-length lead in the stretch called the Kentucky Derby in a long time, since Spend-A-Buck. And there's only been a handful of them in history. Horses who have led at the stretch call by 5 lengths in the history of the Kentucky Derby, you can count them on 2 hands. I mean, it's only like 5 or 6. I put the list together for my NBC stats pack that I'm working on for the Preakness, and it'll probably be one of our graphics in the show. But it's a very limited number, and there's a long time between horses like Spend-A-Buck and Old Rosebud back in the early days of the Derby. I mean, to blow the field away at that point in the race is not common. I mean, that was a high-end performance. And look, you're doing it against 18 rivals. They're all males. He's already beaten some good horses throughout the course of the spring that we have respect for. So, yeah, California Chrome has earned that top perch. I mean, you know, you take anybody else in the Kentucky Oaks, you put My Miss Sophia or Lemons Forever, you put any of them in the Derby, and they're 30-1 shot. So while Untappable has been dominant, she hasn't beaten the same kind of horse as California Chrome has. So numbers guys might stack her up with him, but I would take California Chrome in any ranking over Untappable at this stage. But I'd love to see him race and let them prove it themselves.
Yeah, and hopefully that will happen. Steve Asmussen has certainly alluded to the fact that she'll face the boys at some point, or he'd like to see that. Won't be coming up in the Preakness, but we'll keep our fingers crossed and see if it does happen sometime this year. Another horse that we hope maybe test the envelope a little bit is Wise Dan this year. I want to get your thoughts on that one out of the weekend race. This is the Woodford Reserve Turf Classic. We're going to watch the stretch run. It will be number 1, Wise Dan, getting it done, but just barely over Seek Again. That said, it was a gutsy performance because I thought Seek Again was going to go by, but Wise Dan just would not let that happen. The NBC broadcast, they thought, maybe Wise Dan might not be as good as he was now as he is 7 years old. That said, I guess Charlie Lopresti over the past couple of weeks says he's doing very well, in fact, and you can't deny he got it done. It wasn't as impressive a win as he had in this race last year, but it was impressive in a different way, and that, as I said, he just would not let this horse go by. So again, Jeremy, while you talk, we're going to watch the stretch run, but give me your impressions of Wise Dan.
Well, one thing we have to remember is Wise Dan missed a lot of training this winter in Kentucky. Lopresti doesn't go to Florida. He keeps all of his horses in Kentucky on the farm and trains, and they lost a lot of time. Charlie's horses were all miserably short and woefully short at Keeneland, and he admitted that. And so Wise Dan is behind the schedule compared to what he was last year, which was a very mild winter, if you remember. So, Wise Dan is not as fit as he was going into those previous years. When you get a little bit older, any athlete will tell you, and any horse will tell you, it takes a little bit longer to work out the kinks as you come back from a layoff as well. So let's hold the phones a little bit. He's run twice this year, both in Grade 1 races at Keeneland and Churchill Downs at signature events, and he's 2 for 2. I mean, the horse has run, I believe, in his last 18 starts, he's got 16 wins in 2 seconds, I believe, in his last 18 starts now. I mean, we rush to anoint the next superstar in horse racing, and we also rush to say that someone is over the top and over the hill. Everybody's trying to make a point of saying, I was the first one to tell you he's not as good as he was, or I was the first one to tell you he's the next coming of something. I have no doubt in my mind that Wise Dan is still an absolutely elite horse in the Horse of the Year consideration for 2014 and should be a strong, dominant force throughout the year. He got in a lot of trouble under the finish line the first time in this race, and that made him rank and wanting to fight the rider because he was getting jostled around, and yet he was still able to overcome that, put away a good field, and win at the end, showing some determination. So I thought it was one of his better performances. I'm not a numbers guy, and I don't care about big, flashy win margins so much. So, I think some guts and determination go a long way. I would rather see a horse show some guts and win some close races than just blow everybody away every time. Because if you're blowing away the competition every single time, it's probably that the competition isn't that super, or you're just a tremendous, tremendous horse who has a big advantage. But, look, Wise Dan, I think he's probably as good as he's ever been, and I think you're looking at a horse who's behind the training schedule a little bit, who's only going to get better as the season goes on.
And along those same lines, let me ask you about Will Take Charge in the Ali Sheba.
I'm not sure why he was in that race. I mean, why run there other than you want to be running on Oaks and Derby weekend? I mean, the horse, he was, in Gulfstream ran the Don, okay, big-time race. Oaklawn Handicap, big-time race. Ali Sheba, circle the one that doesn't belong on the schedule. I mean, to drop back. So to me, it wasn't the right race to be in from the start. You would expect him to have won that race, and to run as bad as he did, it's just baffling. But, he's run a lot of clunkers in his career, not many lately. But, he's a horse who was, first or seventh in a lot of different starts as a 3-year-old. So he may be one that you need a little bit of time off now from just a little bit too much too soon early in the campaign, and comes back stronger later in the year for another Breeders' Cup type run. I would hope that he's not going to be on the calendar, every couple weeks. And, and if he's back on the schedule Belmont weekend just because they want to run because it's a big weekend, I don't think it'll be doing the horse the right justice. He's an excellent horse. We know that about Will Take Charge. He's a superb horse, and he's better than what he showed last Saturday. But it just seemed like sticking a square peg in a round hole. That race never felt right, but you just kind of felt, well, he almost has to win it because he's so much better than these other ones.
And before we let you go, just want to touch on one more 3-year-old race. We've been talking 3-year-olds all year long leading up to the Triple Crown, and obviously the highlight, the jewel, was Saturday at Churchill Downs, the Kentucky Derby. But the next day, Sunday at Belmont Park, there was an interesting little undercard stakes race for $100,000, the Gold Fever, and it was interesting for a couple of reasons. First, we had a 5-horse field, but there was an entry. So there was only 4 betting interests. The entry were the Admiral from Bob Baffert and Havana from Todd Pletcher. Havana, who last year broke the maiden in the career debut at Saratoga, followed up with a win in the Champagne, and then in the 3rd career start ran 2nd in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. So 1 to 5 on the morning line was the entry of the Admiral and Havana. But there was another horse to me that in the race was interesting, and we have talked about this horse on the show earlier, and that was the Guadalupe Preciado runner, Favorite Tale, who ran so well at Parks this season, and you have to think he made 3 starts at Parks as opposed to maybe 1 or 2 because of the quarantine situation. But eventually he got away from Parks, went into the Bayshore last time, and was a disappointing 7th. But the Bayshore was 7, the Gold Fever was 6, and it does wind up to be Favorite Tale getting it done. We'll watch the stretch run. Number 4, Favorite Tale gets it done. Number 5, Pure Sensation, will finish 2nd. And with a race with no show betting, with the entry of Havana and the Admiral finishing 3rd and 4th, and for folks watching the race, Havana is number 1A. It set up some wild place prices. Give me your thoughts on the Gold Fever, both Favorite Tale and Havana.
Well, if you've got Baffert and Pletcher in an entry, 1 speed, 1 closer, you feel pretty good about getting that number on the ticket somewhere. So, quite a surprise, and Havana just didn't run his race that people would expected from 2, but it's hard to come back. We just expect these horses just to run back to their paper and their newsprint, and that doesn't always happen. Favorite Tale is a fast horse. We've talked about him going back to that debut in 107 and change at Parks, and he's been on our Countdown to the Crown radar, not necessarily as a Derby prospect, but as a fast 3-year-old you want to keep your eye on. And this horse really does have Breeders' Cup sprint potential because he's a true 6-furlong horse. And we've seen some 3-year-olds have some success in that race over the years. And so without a real dominant sprint division kind of horse on the male side this year, I think that you're looking at a horse like Favorite Tale that maybe by the end of the year is one we're really talking about in the sprint rank. He's super talented, and I'm surprised there haven't been some bigger money offers out there to try to lure him away from that stable. But again, there's not a big market for people going out and buying sprinters. So, I think he's one that can continue to pick off the right purses, and if he gets really good at the right time, step up in class at 6 furlongs. If you go to Woody Stevens with him going 7 furlongs on the Belmont undercard, probably not the right move. I think keeping him at 6 furlongs is key.
Yeah, and if he was 2 years old and winning at 6 furlongs, then the big money offers would come. Even though he wasn't proven to go longer, the big money offers would still come. But as a 3-year-old, it's a little bit different. But I agree, he does set up to be a horse that will be interesting to watch going forward this year. All right, Jeremy, as always, we appreciate the visit. Again, we'll tell people to go to HorsePlayerNow.com, pick up the Countdown to the Crown package on Friday. There will be a Derby recap, always very good information, and go over, catch up with the night school archive from last night as well, because that was an interesting topic. Jeremy, as always, we appreciate the visit. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, and good racing to everyone.
Thanks. Jeremy Plonk, HorsePlayerNow.com. We will take our next break, and when we come back, Gene Kirshner, the Buffalo News. We'll talk some more Derby. It's post-Derby week, so stay tuned. All of that right after this.
This is Racing Across America with Seth Merrow.
The future of online betting is here, and only at the all-new CapitalOTBBet.com. CapitalOTBBet.com delivers a state-of-the-art wagering experience found nowhere else in horse racing. CapitalOTBBet.com. Log on today.
Fascinated by the world of horse racing? Interested in honing your handicapping skills? Class is in session. Night school, Monday nights. Easy to access online. It's free, interactive, and informative for the casual and serious race fan. Horse Player Now Buzz. Live horses to watch emailed to you daily. Our eyes, your prize. Night School in the Buzz. Visit horseplayernow.com for details.
Each morning on the OTB TV network, you get the very best in horse racing programming. Weekdays begin with the Handicappers Report, where professional handicappers share their selections and analysis of the day's racing. Followed by Racing Across America, a daily conversation with racing personalities from around the country. Saturdays include Down the Stretch, where Mark Casano speaks with the biggest names in racing. And Sunday mornings, it's Loose on the Lead, where Steve Bick and I offer news and a unique lineup of weekly guests. All here on the OTB TV network.
Funding your Capital OTB bet account is as easy as 1, 2, 3. 1. Easy Money. Clearly the fastest and easiest method of depositing funds into your account. Make deposits or withdrawals in just minutes. 2. Green Dot Money Pack. Gives you instant access to your funds. Green Dot Money Packs are available at thousands of retailers nationwide. And 3. MasterCard Visa. Simply click on the link from the funding page, enter your account information, and fund your account. CapitalOTBBet.com. Log on today.
Hey, race fans, head down to the all-new Clubhouse Racebook. With live horse racing on more than 250 flat-screen TVs, state-of-the-art wagering terminals, and amazing Vegas-style atmosphere. The Clubhouse Racebook, 711 Central Avenue, Albany.
Welcome back to Racing Across America. As promised before the break, joined now by Gene Kirshner, racing columnist for the Buffalo News. Good morning, Gene.
Morning, Seth. How are you?
Very good. And envious of you being down in Louisville over the weekend. We've had a couple of guests on already this week where I've asked this question, but I'm always curious. You know, I think of Louisville on Derby weekend is probably a little bit similar to Saratoga, where the town just becomes immersed in horse racing. Give us a little feeling for Louisville itself when you're away from the racetrack on Derby weekend.
Oh, it's anywhere you go, people just asking you, who do you like? Or, you know, what are you thinking on the Derby? And you know, oh, you're lucky you get to be right down there and watching the race from the winner's circle, and all kinds of neat things. It's just it's a cool vibe. The city just becomes alive with horse racing. There's posters all over town, just welcoming race fans, and you're right. It's a lot like Saratoga on opening weekend, where it just the town just comes alive.
And also, before we get to the racing itself, I want to ask you another question I've touched on with a few of the guests. The big screen and the backstretch. Reading about it, I was a little bit curious when they announced it a few months back. And then the last week or so, it's been unveiled and we've got some reaction. Seems to be getting very, very good reaction. What were your thoughts of the big screen on the backstretch?
Other than the fact that it's kind of an eyesore when you're looking at it from the backside of the track, it really came in handy for me. I mean, being in the winner's circle trying to watch the race, you miss the whole backside of the race, and there's only a couple of smaller screens right in the infield. So it gave a great perspective, and it's so clear. I mean, it's like 15,000 square feet wide, and it's just a tremendous piece of equipment. And it was actually nice. I took a couple pictures from up top on Friday, on Oaks Day. I was up in the finish line suites, one of the places I had access, and it's a great place to watch the track. It's like being on the roof at Saratoga, and you can really see what an imposing figure that board is out there. But it's nice, I'll tell you.
Yeah, and as I say, that seems to be the consensus of the folks I've talked to, and they've said similar to what you said, and a lot of them noted that folks on the infield were really focused on the board too, because typically in the infield, I guess, Derby time every year with so many people in the infield, a lot of people miss the race, but this year they had the big board to look at, so it came in handy out there as well. Gene, all right, let's take a look now at the Kentucky Derby itself and get some of your thoughts on the racing action. And as we lead into the Kentucky Derby, I just want to bring up your April 25th column in the Buffalo News, your annual Degrees of Separation Derby column, where you parse it out. Last year we had you on before. We didn't get a chance this year, but it's always very entertaining as you parse things out by different categories. Humorously titled, one of my favorites is the Pamela Anderson division. Why is it named that? Because it's the horses who have done it on synthetic surfaces, so that's kind of interesting. But I will note, as we watch the Derby, your Charlie Sheen category, and of course the Charlie Sheen category is for horses you expect to be winning. You had California Chrome right on top, and I think actually when it came down to your selections, you were with me with Intense Holiday, but I give you credit under your, again, winning category. You knew California Chrome was going to be the horse to beat. So again, the very fun Degrees of Separation column, you did tag the winner in there in the correct column. But again, as we watch the race, I'll also ask you, as I say, I think you and I were thinking similar about Intense Holiday. My thought on Intense Holiday, and I'll see if you thought the same thing, top of the stretch, I thought he was in a pretty good spot. And until about the 8th pole, I thought, you know what, if he can just hit another gear, he might be okay. And then the 8th pole, I think the distance became apparent.
Yeah, I think he hit the wall at the 8th pole for the most part. And I think it's because he was wide. He had a wide trip pretty much all the way around, 4 or 5 wide. and I think that kind of did him in at the end. But he was in a really good spot at the top of the stretch. I said, "Oh man, he could do it." And in my Charlie Sheen category, well, now that you mention it, Wicked Strong was one that I thought, and it's too bad he drew outside because I even wrote in there I was worried about the traffic issues with his late running style, but I thought he had the breeding to do something. But once he went outside, I actually picked him fourth in the paper. And he came in fourth, so that's about the only thing I really hit all weekend. So,
yeah, there you go. And that's as good as a pat on the back with the fourth place finishes. I know exactly how that Derby day went. And we've come out of the race. We're now going to the Preakness, potentially Ride-On Curlin, potentially Danza, certainly California Chrome, and a bunch of new shooters. We're a week and a half out, but what are you thinking about the Preakness?
Well, if you go back to my degrees of separation, I have that Fleet Alex division, which are the ones that, aren't going to win the Derby and come back. I got Ride-On Curlin in there. And if you look back at last year's column, I had Oxbow and Palace Malice as the two horses.
Okay.
I don't know if you remember that.
Yes,
but
yes, I do, now that you bring it up.
Not that I'm always prophetic on those types of things, but, Ride-On Curlin, with the jockey change now to, I think, Rosario, I don't think the horse really expended himself too much, and he still finished seventh in the Derby. I mean, Burrell, the over-under in the press box was 300 yards of when he was going to get him to the rail from the 19th spot, and I think he beat that pretty handily if you watch the replays. So I don't, coming back 2 weeks, I think he may be one to take a look at. He only finished 7.5 lengths out. The trainer there, Gowan, he didn't even meet the press. I think he was so upset with the ride right after the Derby. He's the only one that had no comment coming out of the race. So I think the pace in the Preakness is going to be a lot different than what we saw in the Derby. You've got Social Inclusion, Ring Weekend, Pablo Del Monte. I think we'll see something a little quicker than what we saw in Louisville. It definitely won't be 50 seconds first half like Oxbow last year. And who knows? There's the local prep winner, Kid Cruz, is a closer. So you never know, something may set up for him. But California Chrome, it looked pretty darn impressive on Saturday. So it'll be hard to not to go with him. So.
Yeah, people are talking about the slow time and the low buyer figure, but regardless, he stamped himself as the best of the class. I mean, if he was slow, they were much slower, so he is clearly going to be the one to beat, I think, but it could be interesting. What do you think of Rhea Antonio potentially going?
Yeah, I'm not really sold on that, and I'm hearing some rumors this morning that the reason for the trainer switch was Baffert was totally against her going to the Preakness, so. She's no Rachel Alexander, let's put it that way. And she was trained by one of our local folks out here, the Finger Lakes trainer Jeremiah Englehart. So I kind of soured on that with that whole situation. So
yeah, I agree that because he did a really nice job with her, and it's nice to see a guy like that getting a chance with a big horse. So that was disappointing when they took the horse away from him. But speaking of Baffert and the ladies, I want to go back and get your thoughts on another race on the weekend. And we're going to watch Midnight Lucky, the number 8 horse, win the Humana Distaff. I bring this up because you had a nice Derby Day blog on the Buffalo News website, and I know you were impressed with this performance, as I think everybody was. And what's impressive about this in particular, Midnight Lucky, who was so promising as a 3-year-old last year and only 3 career starts, but it's really, really interesting that she came back off a layoff of almost a year and really destroys this field. And that's what's notable to me. When I first got into the game, you couldn't play horses coming off layoffs like this, but not only does she does it pretty convincingly. What were your thoughts of Midnight Lucky?
Yeah, she looked great. I was down there in the paddock before the race, and she looked tremendous. And I already put my bets in, and I'm like kicking myself because I said, boy, she looks really good, and I was really concerned about the layoff, and was really thinking that this was just more maybe a setup for something later on down the road. And I'm, hopefully we'll see her on Belmont Day, which would be great. If Baffert brings her back, for something like that. But Midnight Lutes, they like the 7 furlongs mile distance, as any horse would, and Rosie's a hot jock, and she did a really nice job with her in the race, lightly raced. So I think she's ready to go for her 4-year-old campaign.
Yeah, again, very exciting return to the races in a year that's shaping up very nicely in a number of divisions. Gene, we talked a little bit about the degrees of separation column, which is so much fun. You also do another annual column towards the end of each year, and it's the Racing Kreskin column, where you make some predictions for the year ahead. And I guess Derby weekend, some of the Kreskin predictions came true.
Yeah, we had 4 predictions that came through, and one that's the start of another one. So half of the predictions there are this weekend, and because people love the Derby weekend, it's a great thing. So the first one was a filly from the West Coast to win the Oaks. No, not so good. 0 for 1. My second one was that the Kentucky Derby winner will come from gates 4 through 7. So I nailed that one.
Nice.
So I'm 1 for 2. The next one was the Derby winner will come out of the Wood Memorial. I think you might remember that because I think you linked me to that article and saying that Kirshner thinks he's the Wood winner's finally going to win, and not so much for Wicked Strong. So I was 1 for 3. The fourth one was the trainer of the Derby will win. The Derby winner will claim his first. So there you go, Art Sherman with his first win. So that's 2 for 4. Now my fifth one. It goes through the Triple Crown and says a colt will win 2 of the 3 Triple Crown races. So I think I'm looking pretty good with that one because I think California Chrome probably, he's looking better than anything to win the Preakness at that distance. But as you know, Big Sandy and the Test of the Champion will await next.
And I agree with you, though. I think on that fifth one, you look like you're in pretty good shape right now. And I think you have the racing world rooting for you through California Chrome and Art Sherman, so to speak, because I think they're such a good story. We would all love to see a Triple Crown be possible, at least heading to the Belmont. And Gene, before we go along, just also want to get a thought I pulled up. You had some shots on the website that you took over the weekend, and I had the Walking Mint Julep Cup, and you had some crazies there in some of your photographs. Give us a little idea of the atmosphere there and the crowd you see on Derby weekend.
Yeah, I think it was like maybe after the Humana Distaff, I said, I'm going to go out, and the paddock is just so cool. It's just crowded with people, and people have all kinds of get-ups on it. There was a group with Tony Danza, masks. And they had different outfits on. One guy was in a nun outfit, smoking a cigar, and we had the Walking Mint Julep, which got retweeted about a couple hundred times, which was a funny one. And there was a fellow with an Indians jersey on with a hockey helmet, and he won my best hat contest for the day. So it's just a fun atmosphere, and I as you know, I like to put a little humor in some of my writing, so I. During the live blog, it keeps some of the folks, off edge and get a little humor into it anyway.
Well, that's what I say. If you're a horse racing fan, you're not having fun. You're in the wrong sport. And Gene, before we let you go, speaking of that, you're a board member of Thoroughfan, the racing fan advocacy and just kind of get-together group promoting the sport. Give us a little update on Thoroughfan and what kind of events you might have coming up.
Yeah, we still have a lot of momentum growing. I'm the treasurer of the group. We're hoping to have a Belmont Day meetup, and we'll post something at the Thoroughfan website, which is at thoroughfan.com. We're working on next year's breakfast, which is part of the Eclipse Awards at Gulfstream Park. This year we had Mandy Pope as our keynote speaker. Groupie Dow's owner, and she did a fabulous job. We honored Cott Campbell with our second Thoroughfan Award. Mrs. Wolfson, the owner of Affirmed, won our inaugural one 2 years ago. So right now we're in preparations of selecting who our speaker and who our award winner is. So, stay tuned to the website there, and we appreciate you giving us the opportunity to talk about Thoroughfan today.
Always happy to do it because, again, it's a great group. Anytime you can get fans together and kind of enjoying the game and, as I say, advocating for it, that's a plus for everybody. Gene, as always, we appreciate the visit. Envious of the weekend you spent down at Churchill. But, again, if people want to go back, go onto the Buffalo News website. You can pull up Gene's column and the live blog and whatnot. They're fun to read even a couple of days after. Gene, again, thanks for the visit.
Thanks, Seth.
Gene Kirshner from the Buffalo News. A little bit earlier, it was Jeremy Plonk, horseplayernow.com. That wraps things up for Racing Across America for a Wednesday morning. We're here every Monday through Friday from 10 until 11 a.m. A little bit earlier was the Handicappers Report. Anthony Mormino and I gave out some selections, Belmont and Suffolk. Hopefully we gave you some good ideas. So enjoy the racing this afternoon. Let's all cash some tickets. We'll see you tomorrow morning.
You're watching OTB TV, a service of Capital Off Track Betting.